In 1923, German workers needed 4 billion marks for bread. By tomorrow, 5 billion. This wasn't shortage. This was economic warfare fought with printing presses.
Governments discovered they could print currency without limit. No gold, no restraint. Just ink, paper, and the power to destroy entire nations through mathematics.
Every currency inflated, every penny printed, every zero added had a price, but not in money, in lives. And the people paying never knew who was profiting.
For centuries, money meant something. It was backed by gold, by real, tangible value. Then governments cut that tie. Money became a promise they could break any time. But historians missed this. Death wasn't just counted in bodies. It was counted in currency collapse, in purchasing power erasure, in the mathematized genocide of savings.
This is not history. This is architecture operating today. Same printing presses, same choices, same people paying the price. They just don't know it yet.
Before 1914, currency was stable for decades. Your 1900 savings had the same value in 1910. Money was reliable. Then war arrived, and everything changed forever. The gold standard was simple. Every note equals 1 unit of gold. Transparent. Impossible to cheat. Until governments needed to cheat. Then the system died.
When war was declared, governments faced crisis. Wars cost trillions. They needed soldiers, weapons, supplies. But they didn't have trillions in gold, so they made a choice.
They suspended the gold standard. No warning, no explanation. Citizens could no longer exchange currency for gold. The promise was broken. Called it temporary, never came back.
Between 1914 and 1920, governments printed more currency than existed in all human history. Not because they had more gold, simply because they could. They needed to fund war. Inflation is hidden taxation. Governments print money without announcement. Prices simply rise. Your savings become worth less. You're impoverished without anyone pulling a gun. This is economic violence. Factory workers earned reasonable wages in morning. By evening, wages lost half their value. By tomorrow, half again. Lifetime savings became worthless through mathematics, not theft. But someone always benefits from inflation. The wealthy. Those with assets, property, land. Their mortgages became cheaper. Their debts manageable, while ordinary savers and workers lost everything. Governments told citizens inflation was temporary for the war effort. It would reverse after victory. They lied. Inflation never reversed. Consequences lasted generations and created the betrayed. What does it feel like when your money becomes worthless? When lifetime savings evaporate? When government admits nothing, but reality shows everything? It feels like abandonment, like the world broke.
But one nation experienced inflation catastrophically. Germany faced not just printing, but impossible reparations. A collapse so severe, it became the worst hyperinflation in modern history.
Treaty imposed 132 billion gold marks in reparations. Deliberately punitive, deliberately impossible. Germany's entire annual revenue couldn't cover 1 year's payments, but they had to try anyway. Germany had no choice. Default and foreign armies occupy. Print currency and inflation destroys everything.
They chose inflation. It seemed like the lesser evil. It was the greater one.
By 1921, hyperinflation had begun. Bread cost 100 marks in January, 1,000 by December. But this was just the beginning. The acceleration was exponential and unstoppable.
By October 1923, $1 American equaled 2 billion marks. 1 week later, 4 billion marks. Days later, 25 billion marks. The currency wasn't depreciating, it was evaporating.
To keep pace with inflation, Germany printed currency constantly. Presses ran all day, all night. But even this wasn't fast enough. Inflation outpaced printing. System collapsed faster than currency created. By November 1923, wages that seemed substantial in 1914 now bought almost nothing. Workers rushed immediately to stores. If they waited hours, those wages would be worth less. Money was hot potato. The greatest catastrophe was the middle class. They had saved, planned, built stability. Inflation destroyed it all. Teachers with lifetime savings became worthless. Engineers suddenly impoverished. The middle class evaporated. By November 1923, German currency had fictional denomination numbers. 1 trillion marks for a single note. Numbers lost meaning. The currency became a joke. But the suffering was real. By late 1923, currency became useless. Germans reverted to barter. Eggs traded for bread. Labor bartered for goods. The currency system failed completely. Money, civilization's foundation, became fiction. The psychological damage exceeded economic damage. Entire life savings erased. Retirement destroyed. Children's futures compromised. Germans lost money, but also lost faith. Lost belief systems could be trusted.
By 1924, Germany stabilized currency, but damage was permanent. A generation lost faith in money, government, democracy itself. The world would pay the price. Germany wasn't unique. It was a preview.
Germany wasn't alone. Throughout 1920s, inflation gripped Europe. Austria, Hungary, Poland all experienced currency collapse. Cause identical: war debt, reparations, continuous printing. Pattern was global. Austria faced similar reparations and collapsed by 1922. The Austrian crown became worthless. Unemployment soared. Vienna, once empire capital, became city of poverty and desperation. Hungary experienced the worst hyperinflation in human history. By mid-1923, $1 American equaled 23 million Hungarian pengo. Even Germany's collapse looked stable. System breaking everywhere. These nations weren't isolated. They were connected through debt, trade, credit. When one currency failed, it strained others. Banks invested in crowns, lost everything. Economies were interdependent and fragile. America followed different path. Less war debt, no reparations, currency stable. 1920s America was prosperous, jazz age, economic growth. But prosperity was built on fragile foundation. But American debt was growing. Stock markets inflated beyond reasonable valuation. Prosperity was based on credit and speculation, not real growth. System was as fragile as Europe's, just less visible. But American debt was growing. Stock markets inflated beyond reasonable valuation.
Prosperity was based on credit and speculation, not real growth. System was as fragile as Europe's, just less visible.
American crash became global within weeks. Britain's economy collapsed. Germany's fragile recovery shattered. Japan's markets fell. Great Depression wasn't American, it was planetary. No one escaped.
But here's the shocking pattern. Same mechanisms creating 1920s crisis have been used repeatedly. 2008, central banks printed trillions. 2020, more currency printed. Response, always same. Consequences, predictable. There's a pattern in history. Crisis leads to printing. Printing leads to inflation. Inflation leads to desperation. Desperation leads to extremism. Extremism leads to conflict. Cycle repeats. It's happening now. Today's indicators mirror 1920s. Central banks printed unprecedented currency. Debt at record levels. Stock markets valued at historic highs despite uncertainty. Income inequality extreme. We've recreated 1923 conditions.
This raises important question. If governments learned these lessons, why do they keep printing currency? Why inflation? Because money isn't just economic tool, it's a weapon. Understanding this requires understanding WW2.
In 1930s Germany rearmed despite economic limits, not through genuine growth, but currency manipulation. Same mechanism that failed in 1923 being used again. War financed through printing.
World War II didn't begin in 1939. It began in 1930s in boardrooms and central banks. Economic isolation, trade restrictions, currency warfare. These were weapons. Economic conflict had been raging years before armies mobilized.
WWI was decided not on battlefields, but in factories. The side with more production capacity would win. Germany could never match American industrial output. Soviet Union's vast resources inexhaustible. War was economics. British and Americans maintained currency stability throughout war. Soldiers paid reliably, supplies purchased at predictable costs. But Germany, Japan, Italy experienced ongoing inflation. Soldiers' wages unreliable. Inflation is military weakness.
All eyes used resource denial as weapon. Naval blockades prevented Germany obtaining oil, rubber, metals. Germany couldn't sustain production. Starvation through economic means. War won through resource control.
America's Lend-Lease shipped supplies to Britain and Soviet Union. Tanks, planes, ammunition, food. Not sold, loaned and leased. America's industrial capacity became deciding factor. War won by economies.
By 1943-1944, American production was overwhelming. Factories produced more than could be shipped. Germany's production failing due to bombing and resource scarcity. Outcome predetermined. Side with more production wins.
But here's what's terrifying. Nations still don't understand this. They still invest primarily in weapons, not economic stability. They still print currency to fund military spending. They're repeating same mistakes.
Today, economic warfare is constant but invisible. Trade wars, tariffs, currency manipulation, sanctions, central bank interventions. These are weapons as deadly as guns, deployed continuously by every major power.
Currency strength is military power. Strong dollar weakens competitors. Currency devaluation is competitive advantage. Central banks fight currency wars constantly. It's invisible. It's warfare. Most important war being fought today.
Modern sanctions are economic warfare. They're starvation without invasion. Nations cut off from trade, banking, resources. Impact devastating. Civilians starve. Economies collapse. No bombs dropped. This is future of warfare. Modern inflation doesn't just reduce purchasing power. It destroys psychology. Young people can't afford homes. Parents ration medicine. Savings destroyed. Trust in government disappears. Inflation is psychological warfare.
As inflation rises, trust in institutions collapses. People stop believing central banks. They stop trusting government. They seek alternative systems. Cryptocurrency rises during inflation. Inflation destroys institutional power.
Same pattern from 1923 Germany repeating. Inflation, desperation, political radicalization. Across globe, extremist movements rising. Not because ideology changed, because inflation destroyed hope. Desperate people embrace radical solutions.
This is the truth historians rarely discuss. Wars aren't fought because nations want territory. Wars are fought because monetary systems collapse. Revolutions aren't ideological, they're economic. Governments fall from inflation. This isn't history. This is architecture currently operating. Central banks are printing currency right now. Inflation is happening to your savings right now. The question isn't academic, it's personal. What will you do?